This week on Bull, hello. I did not copycat him. I'm not a copycat. That's bull. I did not. Oh, hi, Mark. Bullet hello, Shmupcast. I'm your host, Sensei Pong, and welcome to that special extra episode I did mildly sort of promise. And so, yeah, I'm getting on that. Hopefully this becomes a thing. So, yeah, that intro sequence may have been more confusing than anything else, but if you, scurry around and, troll around and gather a whole bunch of podcasts and listen to them like me, well, yeah, I did. I literally did just rip off that bit from the Retronauts podcast, which if you like your retro games, you should definitely go check them out. They do some excellent work over there. I'll leave a link down below to their website. Anyways, what am I copycatting? Well, I'll get into that in a little bit. It's actually pretty funny, but more exciting for you, the listener, if this is the only Shmupcast that you know. So, get hype. No spoilers. There's totally another Shmupcast out there, and for the most part, they're freaking awesome. And I did contact him, and oddly enough, his name is actually Mark, or at least that's the name he goes by, Mark MSX. So go check that stuff out. I'll leave a link down below in the description, but I'll talk about that in a little bit, because it's actually kind of a little funny story that kind of got me all wiggly-tiggly and all that stuff. So, you're probably curious, what is this podcast? If this is your first time listening, this is the Bullet Hello Shmupcast, and I cover everything from shmups, mostly your Danmaku Bullet Hell stuff, and the traditional stuff, and some horizontal stuff, and I also cover some of the other stuff that you might consider shmups. So, flip it blah, don't get angry at me if you're like, that's not a shmup, sensei, Just understand, I'm umbrella. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. I'm doing an umbrella. I'm covering my bases. So what's tonight's itinerary? Well, I'm gonna try to run through the news as quickly as I can with a little segment I call Newsflash, and then I'll talk about the topic or topics of the hour, because I suppose one of it's news, but it's not really the topic of the hour. What is the topic of the hour, though? The topic of this podcast is mostly just me kind of gushing and going over a quick list of what some of my favorite shmups of all time are. And this covers, all the genres. I'm not going to be focusing in on one specific genre or anything, but, I'll go from, the mainline ones, the core shmups, and then kind of start branching off from there from what people might consider shmups and what kind of got me into it, so you get to know me as a shmup fan. Because if you're familiar with my past work, I play a lot of different kind of stuff. I play a lot of different games. Some games definitely more hardcore than others, some very casually. But hopefully this is kind of a nice little introduction, and if people ever ask me, hey, Sensei, what's your favorite shmups of all time? You could just direct them, or I could just direct them straight to episode 2. So, with that, that's good stuff. What else do I have listed here? I had something else. Oh, that's right. Let me just put that down in my notes. Apparently, I didn't finish my notes. I can't talk while I'm typing because my keyboard is so clicky. It's an old keyboard. Get off my back. I like it. It's got that nice spring in its step. So, and the final little segment of this podcast, I'm going to be delving into a little game I've been recently playing. But stipulations, I haven't played it that much, so I can't really go into too much detail. But it's a pretty shallow enough game where I feel like I can probably give you a good idea of what it is. Maybe next time on the next episode, episode 3, I'll give you a more detailed review of it. If I find anything else that's worthy enough to say, if I feel like it's important, or if I actually change my opinion on the whole thing, we'll see. So yeah, let's carry on with that. Newsflash. Now, so this is actually more of kind of a small announcement for the podcast. I am officially on iTunes, so go check that out. Leave a review if you'd like. I would prefer more positive reviews, but it's your own opinion. I'm not saying your opinion is wrong, but just know I may or may not approve. But then again, if it's funny, even if it is a 1-star review, I'm more or less likely going to read it out on this podcast if I find a way to deliver it comedically. So, yeah. Anyways, other quick announcement that I want to talk about real fast was the other Shmupcast that you should go check out, and a little background story on this. So anyways, as you know, let's get this clear. I've been thinking about doing the Shmupcast for a little bit of time. It's actually been in the back burner of my head for a while, but, it's been more like in the past few weeks, maybe like 2 months, where I've like really kind of thought about it in my head. And it was about like 2 weeks before I actually tried recording the Shmupcast, and I was thinking, well, the first episode, and I was thinking to myself, okay, how am I even going to do this? Am I even really qualified for this? And I'm not even really sure if I am, but that's fine. But, I thought about it, and then, so I recorded it, and I tried editing it, and then Audacity started crapping out on me again, freaking corrupting my files, and I was like, blah, blah, and that's why it took me about a week to edit that podcast. So I recorded it on the 6th, and I posted on the 13th. Now, here's the funny thing. Y'all. Now, in between that time, freaking same wavelength, same idea and everything. Another guy actually out there who's a bit more hardcore on the shmup genre than I am by a long mile. Definitely on like the Japanese danmaku stuff, from what I can tell, just right off the bat. Gushes about DonPachi, well, cave stuff in general, which is fine. I love cave stuff, and if he likes the bullet hell stuff, I definitely direct him to cave. So obviously he knows what he's talking about. Anyways, point is, he had the same idea, and in between, like literally right after I posted it, I was like, oh, let's check out the Shmup forum. When I reference the Shmup forum, there's really only one, from what I can tell. I haven't really looked, but they are the Shmups forum. So that's, again, shmups.system11.org. So I went on that forum because I was like, let's see if there's anything interesting out there, any kind of news, any whatever. And then I looked down, the general chat, and shabam, another guy was like, hey, I'm going to start up a Shmup podcast, and I'm open for ideas or guests or whatever. And I was thinking to myself, yeah, having a guest on here would actually be a really good idea. I should really figure out how I can do that for myself. Other than being like, hey, come on over to my house. Let's talk about damn shmups. I need like a better setup, or like figure out how to actually use Discord, because I'm old. But, I don't know what them kids are into these days. That sort of stuff. Anywho, so I was like, oh, snap. Should I publicize my shmup podcast here? I don't know. Is there any way you can click that quieter? Okay.
You're just gonna have to edit after clicking.
I think I can. I think I can. I don't know if I can. Okay. Anyways, if that clicking gets annoying, feel free to leave a 1-star review out on iTunes. Actually, please don't. Like and subscribe. Anyways, what was I gonna say? I was thinking to myself, I was like, wait a second. I thought I was going into an empty vacuum here, man. I can't compete with that. I can't. I know my podcasts aren't going to be as good as anybody else's. If they actually know what they're talking about, then this guy kind of does. I was like, okay, well then, I'm going to become. I don't want to be that guy, whatever. But it was still kind of funny. He's a nice guy. I contacted him. I was like, dude, I had like literally the same idea, and it was what's even better, and what made this even weirder. Like, I don't necessarily believe in the idea of, like, the conscious ether of, like, the social consciousness where all minds are connected and all that kind of stuff. But I do believe that zeitgeists do happen. You can't deny that it does. It's, being, like, the idea that, two ideas from two very different areas come up at the same exact time. And honestly, one of those, it breaks down into, like, that philosophical argument that there's no such thing as a creative idea. But that idea, like, it happened in the dark ages with like scientific achievements or like discoveries happening around the same time, but in two very different areas. Like, somebody might discover something in France, but another guy discovers the same exact thing over in China. It's like, they didn't copycat each other. But what made this even funnier is that we both love shmups. We both thought to ourselves, hey, man, there's no good shmup podcasts out there. I'm pretty sure people would want to listen to that. And we're both from the American Northwest. And I was like, okay, well then. Apparently, maybe this is a Northwest thing. Then again, where he's at is I don't know if he'd really consider that Northwest, or maybe he'd consider that Rockies. I don't know. Either way, it really doesn't live that far away from me. I can probably like drive there in like 7 hours. It's pretty nuts. Depending on where he is, I didn't actually look it up, but I know what state he's in because he mentions it on his podcast. No, the sensei ain't creeping. If you're worrying about that, I'm not like stalking him on Facebook. I haven't done that in like 10 years. Get off my back. Y'all done it yourself. Put it back in your pants. Jeez. But anyways, so get hyped for that if we ever do a collab, because I think that would be actually really cool, and we'd probably have some pretty neat talks. What makes his podcast really neat, though, is that he goes into some really good detail about like things I probably wouldn't be talking about on this podcast, like hardware setups and like deep dives on like different kind of stuff. Because frankly, from what it seems like, and this is really good for you, the listener, his opinions, I feel, are almost a diametric opposite, kind of like the yin and yang of like, that the fan base of shmups, where it's like, granted, I don't really consider myself truly hardcore. I think I straddle that area between, casual and hardcore, leaning more towards hardcore because I play a lot of, shmups. So I'm not necessarily good at any of them. He's probably better, way better than me in a lot of shmups, but it's fine because he actually tries. He actually he actually tries to go for like, the scoring methods that would come around, like combos and technicals and like grazing and all that kind of technical stuff. But anywho, it's kind of interesting. So I feel like if we actually got into a conversation about different kind of shmups, we would probably have differing opinions. So why is that good for you? Well, if you enjoy both of us, or if you enjoy his more less disorganized like me, rambly nature of how I run a podcast, go ahead. Go listen to him. He's great. I actually subscribe to him. He's awesome. I really digged his first 2 episodes. But man, that's going to be annoying if that actually picks up. That is going to be terrible. It's going to be like Don't purposely do it, dude. Come on. Anyways, so like let's say, a new game comes out. I lost track of my thought, but I think I got the train back on the track here. That proverbial track. Anyways, like if a new game comes out, you can see maybe 2 different sides of the coin. Though at the same time, I'm pretty sure, what we would consider a good shmup, would probably be the same, because it's not hard to like distinguish, oh, this is garbage, and don't be surprised if we both agree about that, whatever. If something new comes up, or if, some other company decides to do something, we're like, they could have done that better. I'm pretty sure, opinions would line up. But either way, one way or the other, his podcast is quite a bit different than mine. He actually does more. He reminded me a little bit of Retronauts. And that's why I used the Retronauts intro to this podcast, because he reminded me a little bit of Retronauts, where they actually go and talk about things in better detail than me. I'm more like the Cox and Crendor of Shmupcasts, I suppose. I don't think that's a good thing. They're hilarious, and I'm not that hilarious, so. But anyways, if you are curious, his podcast is called The Electric Underground, and it is available on SoundCloud and hopefully Stitcher. I don't know. I was able to get it on Android, so you can probably get it there. I'm not sure if it's on iTunes just yet, but I'll leave the RSS link down below in the description. I'll also leave a link to his SoundCloud, so go check that out. First episode, he talks a little bit about himself, what he prefers, kind of like what I'm doing on this one. And no, it's not. I'm not copycatting. Let's just say, look. Here's the thing. I highly doubt that he copycatted me, because it would have been impossible for him to. And I know for a fact I didn't copycat him. So it's weird. It's weird that it happened, but it's oddly coincidental, and it's more funny than anything else. But yeah, that first episode, he talks about what he's into and what he likes, his dislikes, and all that kind of stuff. And second episode, he actually has an interview, and that interview was awesome, so go check that out. A little teaser, he talks to a game developer, so that's pretty cool stuff. So let's actually jump onto what this segment was supposed to be. Let's pull that intro again. Skibbity-bop-a-doo-bop-a-doo. Newsflash. All right. Let's do this. Billy Mitchell's scores have been revoked from Twin Galaxies. Now, if y'all don't know who Billy Mitchell is, I wouldn't say super famous or popular, but he's definitely known within the gaming sphere and the competitive gaming sphere when it comes to like getting high scores, and his notable high scores include Pac-Man and Donkey Kong, but all his scores on Twin Galaxies have now been revoked due to a controversy that arose that people had found out that his Donkey Kong score was actually done on MAME, even though he had stated earlier that it was all on original hardware. So, shabam, that sucks for Billy, but at the same time, you cheated, dog. You can't go back on that. And, for the sake of Twin Galaxies, I'm kind of happy that they brought down the hammer on that. At the same time, Billy, you shouldn't have done it. I know it was tempting, but you shouldn't have done it. And look, does this taint my personal image of Billy Mitchell or not? I've never really had an opinion on Billy. He was just one of those people that would put high scores on a thing. I don't know him personally, so don't think that I do. And I did actually know about him before that famous documentary called King of Kong, which is a fun documentary, by the way, but they really paint him as kind of the villain, kind of the mean guy. But I didn't think he actually was. I was just actually, at that time when watching King of Kong, I actually thought it was one of those documentary spins where it's just like they kind of paint a certain thing a certain way to give a certain feeling so the audience has a certain opinion when they walk out of the theater. That's because usually, almost always, documentaries always have some sort of agenda. It doesn't matter if it's a positive or negative or whether you agree with it or not kind of agenda. It's not the point. I mean, that almost all documentaries or all documentaries do have some sort of thing that they're trying to do to create, some sort of dramatic tension. That way the person watching the documentary has more feelings engaged into watching it. That way they actually want to watch the entire documentary all the way through. So that's what I was thinking with Billy Mitchell in terms of King of Kong. So I didn't actually think, oh, whatever, I viewed it more as like, oh, they painted him as the heel, kind of like in WWE, kind of like when you paint, a famous wrestler as a heel, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're the bad guy. It doesn't really mean that they're a jerk. They're just playing one on TV. So that's what I was thinking. But that sucks for Billy, though. Why does this interest you as a shmup fan? Well, I was thinking to myself, they did just hammer on that one guy that had the high score for this one Atari 2600 game. Drag Race. I don't remember. It's probably one of those forgettable 2600 games I picked up for a little bit, and it was like, nope, because I like my Atari 2600 games, but I'm kind of picky at the same time. It really depends, and I have to really be in the mood more than anything else. But anywho, point is, I was looking into it, and I was thinking to myself, well, maybe if some of these famous players kind of start dropping out due to cheating, maybe you, as a shmup fan, can submit your own scores. Just remember, don't cheat. Don't pull a Billy on me, son. You ain't gonna like that down the line. What your mama gonna think about that? That sort of stuff. Anywho, but so I went to Twin Galaxy's website and I realized H1Z1 Pro League is still a thing. I was kind of surprised about that. I didn't realize people still played that. Apparently they do. Well, am I right? And somewhere in my notes I have a Lawbreakers joke here, but I'm not going to do it. Rest in peace. Though, out of my own curiosity, I did look up, I was thinking to myself, okay, well, what's a famous shmup that the people are into, famous thing that everybody would be into? I was like, let's just type in DonPachi. That's kind of the go-to. And I found DonPachi Resurrection version 1.5 for the Xbox 360. And now this makes me curious and kind of interested only a little bit, even though I don't think I have a working Xbox 360 at the moment. The one that is working, the tray gets stuck a lot, and then the other one is missing a cord because I bought that one for $1. I don't even actually know if it works. I have to fix it. I have to sit down and clean it out. Probably more or less, which isn't hard. I'm just lazy. Anyways, my point is, DonPachi Resurrection version 1.5 for the Xbox 360 has no scores. So, hypothetically, I can go in there literally blindfolded and get the world record for that. So, if you're all interested in that, maybe you should go on Twin Galaxy's website and look up your favorite shmup and see, oh, hey, how do I rank up against the world players? And maybe if you're into score chasing, like official score chasing, maybe you should do that. It seems like a fun thing that, you can probably do on your free time. If DonPachi Resurrection on 360's competition is that low, I'm pretty sure the competition is pretty low for a lot of other random ones out there. But in all seriousness, a lot of the obscure ones, the competition is pretty low because several years back I looked at it and I was like, dude, I can beat the world record for Tetris Attack and Yoshi on the Game Boy. So, who knows? Maybe I'll actually go for that, like, warm back up my puzzle chops, because that's what I'm actually good at, that sort of stuff. Who knows? Maybe I'll actually blindfold myself and play DonPachi and get the world record for that. I won't make it past that first level, because I don't know that game that well. But, even if I, like, score, like, 2 points, hells yeah, Batman. Anyways, next up on the news, Sega Ages has been announced by Sega. That sounded redundant. Sega announces that Sega Ages will be coming to modern consoles. No, for me, notably, the Switch. I believe it's this, maybe just the Switch. I don't know. But Sega Ages has been announced. And the things that they have leaked in terms of what kind, well, it wasn't leaked, it was an official announcement, but the games that they have announced for that, if you're not familiar with the Sega Ages series, it's basically them just re-releasing stuff like classic things. The 5 games include Phantasy Star, and it was in parentheses the PS2 version, but if that's, I'm fine with the Mega Drive version as long as it's, runs fine and all that. Thunder Force 4, the Sega Saturn version, which is pretty dang cool and actually relevant for this podcast. It's a classic, good horizontal shmup. Not super familiar with Thunder Force 4 specifically myself. I'm more familiar with like Thunder Force 3, but I know through the grapevine that Thunder Force 4 is phenomenal, so that's the one to be looking out for. The other 3, no big surprise here, but Sonic the Hedgehog from the Sega Genesis, aka the Mega Drive, Alex Kidd in Miracle World, which I believe one person may have clapped for that. It may have been my sister, Birdie Berry, because he's really big into Alex Kidd for some reason, and Gain Ground, the arcade version, which I have not actually played, and I'm really quite curious about that game. I know about the game. I'm familiar with it. It's, as far as I remember right, it was kind of a strategic top-down action shootery type game, and you can, like, jump through different characters. I'm probably getting my information wrong, but if I remember right, it's a like a late 80s classic. You should look that up. If it looks interesting, go check it out. But yeah, the one to be looking out for is Thunder Force 4, and hopefully more shmups be coming out on this list, and if they do, I'll let you know. Moving on. Developer Cave has a thing called Project 3 Just, and actually really fast, I was, looking up some news, and I was like, yeah, let's see what Cave's been up to recently, outside of mobile games. But I was like, let's see what Cave's been up to, and I found out that they were announced that they were making a game last year, and I was like, oh, okay, this could actually be really interesting. I want to see this. I want to know. Project 3 Juice. Now, maybe you shouldn't look this up, because maybe you'll have some minor disappointment. Maybe just a little bit you'll be like, oh, not a Cave game. Well, technically it is, because they're making it. But, yeah, I looked at it, and it looks to be some sort of top-down arena twin-stick shooter. And frankly, I'm okay with that. Now, am I mildly disappointed that it's not, your classic Danmaku bullet hell with the pretty colors and the boom boom? Yeah, I am. But I do like my twin-stick shooters, so I'm not really against that. And it seems kind of neat. It's probably got a lot of, like, progression mechanics, maybe? Like some perks, maybe? Like some upgrades to your mech? Because it looks to be like a mech fighting type top-down shooter. And it does have that, like, layer of, like, cave glaze on it that makes it look all pretty and stuff. And it looks good for what it is, but unfortunately, it's not what you think. Don't overhype it, please. But, I'm sorry to announce that it's not your classic cave game. But I might still be interested, and you might actually still be interested if you like your twin-stick shooters, so... or twin-stick shmups, as you want to call it, or whatever you all want to call it. But if you are interested in that, go check that out. A news update. So, I talked about Manticore Galaxy last time on my well, Manticore Galaxy, Manticore Galaxy. I don't have the colon here on my notes. Give me a second. Give me a break. Manticore Galaxy on Fire on the last podcast. That's what I talked about. And I talked about how it got delayed like the day before or the day of, I think it was the day before its release date. And I was like, grumble, grumble. Hopefully it's okay. Hopefully it's good. Man, y'all are going to be peeving off a lot of people that were actually hyped for that. And I was mentioning something about like, at least give us 2 week notice. At least give us, that's what you do at a job. At least give us a month. You know, that's what an apartment complex gives for, you know, an eviction notice. Give them a month, you know. And people, I think some people were getting upset that, you know, maybe that Dark Souls was getting delayed on Switch. But hey, y'all, it's like 5 weeks from now, or 5 weeks from when they announced it. So don't get upset. It could be worse. Honestly, 5 weeks is fine with me. If you're all curious about that, on my opinion on that, you know, that's fine. If you know. If it's one of those things where it's like, we really don't think we can get this done on time, there's this one bug that we really want to fix, or it really needs to be fixed, go ahead and do it. It's a better game for us in the future. Now, the good news is, Manticore Galaxy on Fire has already released. And the final announcement was that it was a bug, like a last-minute bug that they found that they just couldn't fix on time. Okay, that's obvious, you know. Why else wouldn't they release it? Anyways, at least that's better than saying, well, actually, we only have 80% of the game done. Yeah, you know. But either way, the good news is, from what I've looked, from what I've perused, no, I didn't pick it up. From what I've seen and perused, people are actually giving it positive scores. So that's a good thing. The only negative score I can see from somebody that I did read from somebody, I believe it was on Metacritic, one of the, probably a user review or something, was that it was mildly repetitive. Once that, you know, excitement of the first few levels wears off, it becomes repetitive, and it's like you're doing the same thing over and over. And at the same time, I'm actually not that against that. Thinking, because my idea was that it was maybe like a Rogue Squadron kind of thing, maybe a Star Fox kind of thing, maybe a Wing Commander sort of thing. And I was thinking to myself, you know, actually, if it's done really well and it's that sort of flight sim or maybe rail shooter, you know, sort of thing, I'd be way down for that. Unfortunately, this is still a big maybe for me in terms of buying it. I don't know. I'm gonna sit on it because there's other things I'd rather spend my money and time on, which is my own personal opinion. Go ahead and get it. If you do get it yourself, please let me know if you like it, and let me know if you'd like me to shout you out here on the podcast in a possible segment I may or may not do called Not the Pong. I don't know. I'll think of something. But basically, what's your opinion? Not mine. Or, you know, Not the Pong can also include like, yo, Sensei, you're totally wrong. You're full of bullcrap. Just stop making this pod, please. You know, that sort of stuff. I'll feature that on Not the Pong. Yo, get hyped for that. Moving on. Savaria Delta has been announced to be damn, I can't say that word. It's spelled P-S-Y-V-A-R-I-A-R. I know that should be a lot easier to pronounce, but it's not. Sivarier Delta. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. Sivarier Delta has been announced to be in development for the PS4 and Nintendo Switch. And according to Nintendo Life, it will be released on August 30th of 2018. And this will include a new mode called Delta. I'm actually quite excited about this one. This one is kind of a classic, kind of a good old, you know, more modern like bullet hell. And I'm not super familiar with it, but from what I've seen, yo, I'm excited. Moving on, some notable releases that have come out that I recommend are Panzer Dragoon Orta has found a re-release on the Xbox One. What's that if you don't know the Panzer Dragoon series? Well, it's a 3D rail shooter, and I know it's not your classic traditional shmup, get off my back. But it's still a good game, and if you like that sort of stuff, like your Star Fox 64, or on here on my list I have the, in all caps, maybe Rebel Assault 2, the flying areas, with, So man, I forgot what the Millennium Falcon was called for a second there. The Millennium Falcon, it's only $9.99 American dollars out on the shop. So go check that out if that sounds interesting to you. And I highly recommend it. Panzer Dragoon in general, the series is really good. So, mwah, mwah. I just want to like hold it in front of my face and just, yeah, we're gonna stop that train of thought. Another notable release that I recommend is Dragon Blaze on the Nintendo Switch has come out for $7.99. This was a few weeks ago. Anyways, which comes up to this other thing that I had mentioned on the last podcast where I said, well, I'm probably gonna get DonPachi Unlimited 3 anyways. Well, I lied. I was like, well, I'm gonna either pick Dragon Blaze or DonPachi Unlimited 3. Well, I've played Dragon Blaze. I haven't played it in several years. I really like that game, so I'm gonna get my Dragon Blaze. So at the moment, for me personally, DonPachi Unlimited 3 is still on the back burner. I'll probably pick it up, get off my back. I'll get it at some point. Everybody says it's the most amazing thing in the world, so whatever. I'll pick it up. Just cool your jets, okay? But am I liking the port of Dragon Blaze, if you're curious? Yes I am. It's really good. Fun fact, I learned that Tate mode is not pronounced Tate. It's pronounced Tate mode. That actually makes more sense now, being half Japanese, because I thought Tate was some sort of acronym that was like some sort of like MAME acronym. Whatever. I don't know. MAME stands for Multiple Arcade Machine Emulator. And I thought Tate was some sort of acronym that I didn't know. I never bothered to look it up. But when I heard someone say Tate mode, I was like, oh, well, that makes sense. Why didn't I see that before? Because in Japanese, if you're not familiar, Tate means to stand up. And I was like, okay, well, that makes complete sense because now I can flip my Switch on its side and play in Tate mode. And that was cool. So good stuff. Okay, good. Good. For a second, I was brain farting and freaking out. I was like, am I actually recording? Yes, I am. I should really check that kind of stuff before I think I start recording. Moving on, Super Hydra has been announced for iOS. That's iPhones for all y'all. But anywho, I looked this up. It actually looks really good. Apparently, I'm gonna have to double check this. Yeah, it's already out on Steam. It's $19.99, and it looks amazing. It looks freaking amazing. Kind of like your real, like, old-school, traditional, horizontal shooters. So maybe some R-Type vibes, maybe some Gradius vibes. I have not played this out on PC, but I'm surprised I didn't see this one come out. Maybe it was like in one of those moments where I just wasn't really paying attention to Steam. Yeah, okay, it was. September 20th. What was I playing out on the Switch? Because the Switch really kind of ate up my PC time in the past year. As you could probably guess. Like, everything's become switch this, switch that, switch it up, yo. That sort of stuff. Like, I'm surprised I missed out on this one. But happy to see it come out on the iOS because... Also, on another news article, it did say the iOS and Nintendo Switch versions are set to release later this year. So, if you still don't know what this might look to yourself, still maybe think Gradius, maybe Scramble. Okay, that's a bad example. I don't know why I have that on my notes. Why do I throw myself off? But if you do want to buy this now, it is currently on Steam, PC, PS4, Xbox One, and Vita. That would have been a new Vita game last year. Huh. They're still making games that aren't visual novels. Interesting. Might have to, scrape off that layer of dust on the Vita. Oh man, my leg's asleep. Why do I sit in this position when I record? Oh. I'm getting too old for this. Anyways, on here on my notes real fast, it's not even real notes, it's just the title of the game. I just put it on here really fast because I found it on Google Play, so I'm assuming it's probably on iOS. And like I said last time, I'm not usually a fan of any shmup on mobile because of the touchpad, and it's just my big old thumb gets in the way and I can't see what I'm doing. I don't like it. But Heroes of Sky actually has pretty positive reviews and has a 4.7 or 4.5, and that's actually not bad for Google Play from what I reckon over the years of messing around with Google Play games. But, what is it? Well, it looks to be a moderately casual bullet hell shooter that you can kind of play in small increments and level up. There's probably some sort of gotcha system in there. I wouldn't be surprised. But if you are looking for like that casual shmup on your phone, maybe go check that out. Let me know how it is. I'll probably end up picking it up and just dabbling in it for a few minutes or more. I don't know, for a few days probably. And then it'll probably be deleted right off my phone. But, I don't know. It actually looked kind of promising, but it has that serious, like, mobile feel that, like, that stickiness that, like, gets on your fingers and you got to pick it out of your nails. Yeah, it's got that whole thing going. But it still looked very promising, so go check that out. It's called Heroes of Sky Shooting RPG. So apparently there's RPG elements as well, so whatever. Level up your ships. Get new weapons. Shabam! Oh, what's this? What's this I see coming around the corner? Steam Watch! So here on Steam Watch, I look out for things that are coming up in the future that look promising. And no, because this is Steam, this isn't going to happen very often. It's a twin stick, get off my back, but it looks good. It actually seems really interesting. It's it's almost got that like vector feel, but it's all in 3D, so it's definitely not vector, It's called D-Vader. That's spelled D-E-V-A-D-E-R. But it seems to be, and at least what they claim it to be, a twin-stick tower defense fusion game. So basically you can, from what I got from the trailer real fast, just by glancing at it, I was like, okay, you're controlling a robot in like a really crazy, bullet helly type twin stick game. That's fun, that's cool, I'm okay with that. While protecting the center of your board, which is like your tower or town or fort or whatever it is, but it's a tower defense. So I'm assuming maybe you can put up like little defenses here and there while controlling the main guy as your main source of firepower throughout the game. So that actually seemed pretty cool. I'm not sure if a price has been set just yet. I could be completely wrong. Feel free to correct me down below if you're watching this out on YouTube down in the comments and be like, yo Pong, you dumb. But it looked cool. I'm actually really excited for this one. I've been for some reason I've been in a twin stick mood. It's just what it is. It is what it is. It happens every once in a while. Anyways, that has been your daily news break. No, when I say daily, I will not make this a daily podcast. So let's take a quick break, and after that, we'll go straight into the topic of the hour. Yeah, good stuff. And welcome back. Topic of the hour, what are some of my favorite shmups of all time, and how did I even get into shmups as a genre? And what other sort of games do I like to play? Why am I asking it like this? Well, this way you can sort of get who I am and where I'm coming from, and just who I am as a person in terms of being a gamer. Real fast, we're going to cover all the stuff that isn't actually shmup related or related to shmups in any way. So, if you know me, it's, you understand that I'm a puzzle fiend and I have an addiction that's kind of an issue, but specifically arcade puzzlers. I do like puzzle games in general, and, that does include maybe like things like Myst, because I guess people, despite that being more of an adventure game, people still consider that, a puzzle game. I do also like the Tomb Raider series. There's a bunch of good like adventure puzzle games, but I absolutely love just straight up puzzlers. And it's both the competitive nature of them, but also just the struggle of them. Like, I do like some obscure puzzlers and some more like quote unquote hardcore puzzle games that a lot of people seem to not like, which I was kind of surprised at. Like things like maybe Dr. Mario, Yoshi. I do like Tetris too. It's an odd one. I do like Blockout, if you know that one. That one's kind of an old, obscure arcade game. But, well, there was also some console stuff. I want to say there's a Sega Genesis one, but it's not that good. But I also like It's Mr. Pants, which I think everybody needs to play at some point because it's actually not that bad. I wouldn't say it's like, a high standard puzzle game. I'd rate it like a 6.5, but, it's Mr. Pants is still pretty fun. It's out on the Game Boy Advance. That was actually the book club game for the Sunset Podcast, which I never got around to. So, actually, let's here. Okay, real fast, just right off the top of my head. The book club. So, for the month of June, after May, because this podcast is probably coming out in May, because I'm looking at my schedule and I don't think I can edit this in time to get it done before the end of end of April. But the book club for June is going to include, it's Mr. Pants, and I know that's not a shmup, but you know what? I think you might enjoy it. You might. I look. I'm not gonna go at this like, be like, oh my gosh, it's a puzzle game. I'll be honest. I'll give you my honest review of it. But to keep it shmup related, let's just off the top of my head, let's just play DonPachi, the original one. I don't care where you're playing it. I'll probably play it in the arcade mode and all that. That version, the arcade version. But why DonPachi? I don't know. It's fun to see where, popular franchises begin. So let's pick DonPachi for that. Uh-oh. There's a lawnmower in the background. And this is also why I don't like recording during the day. Anyways, back on track. With puzzle games, I do like I like them. I like them all. Of course, I do have some of my favorites, and of course that includes, things like Tetris. I really loved Puyo Puyo Tetris from last year, which finally came out to the States, and I was happy to see that. Puyo Puyo Tetris, Game of the Year, 10 out of 10. I've said Dr. Mario. I love Dr. Mario. I love all the reiterations. If I were to say there's a best Dr. Mario, I might have to say it's the Dr. Mario, not Dr. Mario Express, but Dr. Mario Miracle Cure out on the 3DS on the eShop. So go check that out. It's digital only, which kind of stinks, but for being a Dr. Mario game, that one's really cool. It's got challenges. It's got the Dr. Luigi mode, which is brain busting for a lot of people, but I love it because it's inherently harder because you're dropping down 2 pills at the same time. So I like that. That's cool. I like it. I like that extra bit of struggle that comes along with Dr. Luigi. Also, they have Miracle Cure mode, which is pretty neat, where it like adds power-ups and creates it so it has like an endless mode where like bacteria just keeps them coming up and up and up from the bottom. So it's like, kind of like a Tetris Attack thing where like, stop saying Tetris Attack, Puzzle League thing where like blocks keep coming up slowly from the top, or like a endless bubble bust-a-move. I almost said bubble bobble. I was like, no, it's not bubble bobble. Bust-a-move where bubbles slowly just come down from the top. That's kind of neat. It's cool, and I'm happy they were finally able to implement an endless mode with Dr. Mario, because that makes it more fun for me personally, because, give me like a level 20 board in Dr. Mario, I'm just going to be able to clear it out. And Dr. Mario is one of those weird games where it's like really hard in the beginning, and then like it just gets easier as time goes on before you beat the board. So, I like the idea of the endless mode because it just gets progressively, it's, same difficulty level, and you're constantly on the move trying to figure out, oh, how should I set up this cascade? How do I clear this out? Oh, I've messed up here, so how am I going to fix that? That sort of stuff, and I really enjoy that. I've said Puyo Puyo, but with Puyo Puyo, if you want to play something new, which kind of has a Puyo Puyo vibe to it, but that's only because it's like little blobs. It's kind of like Puyo Puyo fused with Super Puzzle Fighter, or Puzzle Fighter by Capcom. It's kind of the Street Fighter weird puzzle spin-off franchise, but it's an excellent puzzle game. But if you go out on Steam, there's a game called Raining Blobs, and Raining Blobs is easily one of my favorite Steam puzzle games out there. But if you want something more specifically like Puzzle Fighter, if you know that series, I would actually recommend Heroes Never Lose, Professor Puzzler's Perplexing Ploy. That's a terrible, terrible name. It's the worst name in the world, and that's why they're not high on the SEO. But it's a great game. Go check it out. I think it's still in early access, but even then, from what I've played, I don't really like dabbling in early access stuff, but it's really good. So, moving on. Let's stop gushing about that. What other what other storf do I like to play? Well, frankly, I don't really have a personal favorite genre. Now, if I were to say, if you were to ask me what sort of genres of gaming do I like to play a lot or kind of prefer from, if you just look at like the Venn diagram of my playtime, well, obviously it's going to be coming into things like puzzle games are going to be taking up a small portion of that, then SRPGs, believe it or not, and then, strategy tactical games. Every once in a while I get into like that huge TCG mood, and there's no end in sight for that. I do like my roguelikes and roguelites. I do like racing games from time to time, and obviously shmups are there as well. Some other kind of stuff I do enjoy playing. I do like playing RPGs and JRPGs, specifically a lot of the classic stuff, but I do like JRPGs in general. I think it's that stat management and like micromanagement and just different kind of strategies. The more options you give me, the more likely I'm going to like it. Not saying I don't like the really linear stuff, but I like branching paths. That's also why I like text adventures and choose your own adventure, and every once in a while a visual novel. And this isn't to say, well, do you like first-person shooters or do you like third-person shooters, the FPS games, everything that everybody else plays? Yes, of course I do. I don't play them very often, come to think about it, but, if a good arena shooter comes in, sort of like a Serious Sam sort of vibe, like that old-school FPS shooter, or maybe like Doom. Oh, hell yeah, that my jam. I do like adventure games as well, so, I don't know. I like it all. It all really depends on my mood, but the ones that really strike my fancy usually overall are like roguelikes, roguelites, SRPGs, strategy and tactical games. This does include, the grand strategy stuff like Europa Universalis and, things that aren't necessarily civilization level, but higher and deeper and more complicated than that. But I'm not downing on Civilization because I love the Civilization games, the Civilization series. That's easily one of my favorite franchises of all time. But RTS games, of course. I do play a little bit of StarCraft from time to time. I'm definitely not competitive. I think I'm maybe like 5% the speed of like a professional player. So I'm getting there, but I don't want to like get carpal tunnel and blow up my hands like blow up on my keyboard. The sensei into that. I don't have it listed here, but I'm kind of surprised I didn't. I just like puzzle games and card games, and there was actually one time when I was like super hardcore into solitaire, and that sounds stupid. I understand that, and you may not understand this, but there are literally hundreds of different types of solitaire games out there, and at one point, at one point I could probably like list off 200 to 400 types of solitaire games off the top of my head. At this point, I could probably list off 200 and give you the detailed rules about different solitaire games, or if you just list off some random solitaire and be like, yo, Pong, y'all know how to play Tsar of Russia? Not be like, Tsarina, or Tsarina, whatever. Why did I choose that game? That was the one with the four decks. That was just... Why did I choose that? Do you know a version of solitaire where, do you know a version of cribbage that you can play with yourself? I can probably say yes, which I do. It's not as good as playing against somebody else, though. I'll just let you know that. But, or, if you're like, hey, y'all, you ever heard of a game called Penguin? That one's a pretty basic one. If you're into, solitaire like me, you may or may not know that one. Or, you could be like me and be that solitaire snob and look at, all the solitaire games on Steam and iOS and be like, this is all just variations on golf. It's the garbage solitaire, I'm not saying I don't like golf or Tri-Peaks. I'm just saying, whatever. Yeah. I love Minesweeper. I'm trying to think of other things. Oh, the game that I'm really playing right now. Well, actually, I've taken a small break, but I'm probably going to jump right back into it real easy. And when I do, I'm warning y'all, I'll get lost in that game again. Because as of right now, I haven't gotten very far, but I have like a little over 50 hours, and I haven't even owned the game very long. But it's Disgaea 5. If you like SRPGs and you like stupid amounts of customization and like side quests and like, okay, well, I want to build a team like this with that and this and that, Disgaea is your jam. Thinking about that, the one game I'm actually super excited for this year is Fire Emblem on the Switch, which we haven't heard a damn thing about. Why? I'm really hoping that it doesn't suck balls. Outside of that, if it does, I am excited for Smash Brothers, and I'm excited for that possibility of Pokemon coming down. Yeah, that'd be cool, right? All right, whatever. Let's move on. Let's move on. Let's talk about what this podcast is actually about. Save it for the Solitaire podcast. What a terrible idea. So, my history with playing shmups. Well, when I was young, I do remember one of the first games I ever played in the arcade was an arcade version of Centipede. Oh, you know, the one with the trackball, where if you play it a bit too much, you might get blisters on me fingers. I don't know what I'm doing. This shtick totally like fell apart, but one of the first shmups I did play was definitely Centipede, and I fell in love with that game when I was a kid. Of course, the side arcade art and the fact that you were fighting a giant centipede and there were spiders dancing around scared me as a kid because I was easily scarable as a kid. But that didn't detract me from not liking the game, because it was fun. It was like one of those things where it's like, oh, now you're conquering your fears. Yeah, just shoot that centipede. Though, to my horror, like 3-year-old Pong, I, in the back of my head, I was thinking to myself, well, if I find a centipede in the backyard, if I accidentally, stomp on it and it breaks in half, am I going to get 2 centipedes now chasing me? No. That's not the case. Don't worry about that. At least I don't think it's the case. Let me know in the comments below, or write a review. Or, if you do write a review out on iTunes, make it one of those reviews where it has nothing to do with the podcast. Whatever it is. 4 out of 5 stars. If you break a centipede in half, no, it doesn't become 2 centipedes. It doesn't have to do anything with this episode or the podcast in general. I just think that would be funny. Just start listing facts about centipedes on all reviews. Please do that. That'd be fun. Maybe that can be a meme. One of the memes all the kids are like scrambling about. But you see what I did there? Scramble. There's a segue for you. There's an old shmup that I personally don't think holds up super well. It holds up well enough, and it's definitely fun still. But there's better horizontal shooters out there. If you're not familiar with Scramble, it's basically the progenitor of what the Gradius series became later on. I don't remember who the developer was. It was either IRM, maybe Konami. I highly doubt that. This is going to bother me. Let's look this up. I should know this. Yeah, it was Konami. Yeah. Haha, I was right. Maybe it was the absolute definitive progenitor of the Gradius. Yeah, it is part of the Gradius series. Okay, whatever. Fine. Get off my back, Wikipedia. Okay, but yeah, Scramble, and then 1942 and 1943. And the reasons why I liked 1942 and 1943, when I was a kid at least, was, I grew up with Indiana Jones. I grew up with my grandpa always talking stories, war stories about World War II, being in the Navy. And, I was like, kind of in my head, I was like, oh my gosh, this is just like World War II. It's literally just like fighting in World War II. And he was in the Navy in the Pacific in 1942. Takes place in the Pacific. So I was like, shabam! I'm connecting with my heritage. Boop 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 boop. That sort of stuff. Not really. Just it's not realistic. Don't look at 1942 as a history source, please. Another game from my really early childhood that I can remember off the top of my head was this MS-DOS game called Sopwith. Now this one really doesn't hold up compared to the others that I've just mentioned. But For the most part, Sopwith is pretty fun. It's kind of, if I'm remembering this wrong, it's not. I don't believe it's multi-directional, but it's a horizontal shooter, and basically you play the role of in World War One, the role of a Sopwith camel. If you don't know what a Sopwith camel is, it's the same type of plane that Snoopy flies when he's imagining that he's the World War One flying ace. He flies a Sopwith camel. Now, historically, I know for a fact, correct me if I'm wrong, Sopwith camels don't look like doghouses, but I do know that from Richthofen's War that the Sopwith camel, Richthofen's War is like a kind of a weird random tabletop strategy game by Avalon Hill, maybe. But anyways, a Sopwith camel has like this, the engine exhaust on one side, so it was actually kind of hard for it to like turn to the left, I believe. I think the exhaust was on the left, so maybe harder to turn, make a hard turn left than a turn right, because the exhaust is pushing on the plane. Anyways, I'm about 100% sure I didn't actually own that one. I want to say most of my memories come from like my friend who lived across the street at the time. But I could be wrong, but I do remember playing that quite a bit when I was a kid. So where I played it, I don't know because I was like 3 or 4, but you know. I'm thinking it might have been a friend's house. I don't really remember clearly. It's around the right time. It was shareware. It's free. If you want to go look up Sopwith and you're really into your old school MS-DOS games that don't necessarily hold up, go check it out. It still plays. You may need to fix the speed of the emulation, but it's still playable. And it's totally free. Out on abandonia.com and I believe abandonwaredos.com. I think that's the site. They do a lot of shareware and freeware and like what they call abandonware DOS games. Games that are so old that one of two things happen. Either the rights owners don't care or the trademarks have died or, you know, the developer's just gone. They went out of business. Who knows? I don't know. Just know that those old DOS games are free, so go check that out if you're into that. But the real question is, what other sort of games did I enjoy growing up over the years? You know, I enjoyed Gradius over the years. I think the first time I played it was maybe when I was like 5 or 6, probably 4. That's a big jump in time. I don't remember, but I remember playing Gradius at a really early age as well. That's a classic one. I do remember Asteroids to some degree, but that's a little bit before my time to be in the arcade. That's definitely before my time in the arcade. I remember the 2600 version, though, from another friend's house, a family friend who owned a 2600. And there was also another family friend that owned a Intellivision. But anyways, I'm detracting. Let's move on. The real question is, when did I actually start getting more serious about my shmups? And this is kind of strange, because it's been a thing that's been over the years, you know, just kind of building up from time to time. And, you know, I've always enjoyed playing shmups. And for the most part, it's always been kind of a casual promenade upon the shmupscape. That sounded better in my head. Yeah. It's always been kind of like an on and off kind of thing. I've always enjoyed them. I've always loved them. But to be honest, growing up, I didn't have that many friends that were really into shmups. Mind you, I was mostly a 90s kid, and at that time, on PCs, you know, you started getting FPS shooters like Wolfenstein 3D and Doom, I believe was around that time. And then you also get other things like, you know, your more action-packed 2D platformers like Super Mario World and Sonic the Hedgehog. So, you know, shmups were kind of like the older form, like the old guard. Of course, you know, you had your outliers like Raiden. But also at that time, fighting games were the big thing, like Street Fighter 2 and Mortal Kombat, and a little later down the road. But with that, you know, I didn't have that many friends that like really loved shmups, so I didn't really get to talk about it. I didn't really get to play them very much with my friends or whatever. But when it really started coming back on for me was in the early 2000s with Geometry Wars, and then maybe a little bit later with Space Invaders Extreme, and my discovery of emulators. So with that, you know, mildly younger Pong was like, oh my gosh, Geometry Wars is just like Tempest. No. No. Geometry Wars is just like Robotron. And that was another one I remember. I didn't play that very much arcade-wise, only because it's kind of an old game, and a lot of the arcade games around the time were being replaced by the newer stuff, constantly. Every once in a while you'd get Galaga, of course you'd have your standard Pac-Man game there. It's the standard. Well, more likely Miss Pac-Man on very rare occasion. I think I've only seen it once, but Junior Pac-Man. That's a good game. I like that one because that one's a hell of a lot harder. And it's kind of you feel good when you actually finish a board. Good luck. But yeah, Geometry Wars. I remembered Robotron growing up, and the Robotron version that I actually played the most of was actually on the Sega Genesis, and I want to say it was called Sega Arcade Classics Volume 1. I believe on that... No. It was... That one had Missile Command, I think. But, another good game. But, it was Williams Arcade Classics, and on there was also Defender, which I remembered a little bit from a little bit earlier with the arcade scene, but that's actually where I played the bulk of my Defender and Robotron time back in the day. It was on that Genesis cart. But with that, I picked up Geometry Wars, the first one, and I thought to myself, oh my gosh, this is like Robotron, but more. And it's got the Tempest guy. Sweet. Now that's what I thought to myself. And if you don't know Geometry Wars, I definitely recommend you pick that up. That is like one of the key points of, I say, like one of the best twin stick shooters out there of all time. It's got like that perfect balance of like leveling up, good enemy variation, great graphics. It's got that pseudo vector graphics going. It's got a lot of particle effects, but it's got the pseudo vector graphics, of like Tempest or Asteroids or like a Vectrix thing. But at the same time, it's got that balance of like the hectic nature of what Robotron used to be. With that, it's also only $4 on Steam, so go check that out if you've got a computer that has what's that saying? A processor made out of a potato. So yeah, if your computer's a potato, it could probably run Geometry Wars. Go check it out. It's pretty good. I originally played it on the Xbox, I believe. Yeah, Xbox. And then I picked it up on Xbox 360. Awesome game, though. Great stuff. Now, Space Invaders is Extreme. I played it on the PSP, and I want to say there was a recent release of that on Steam. I don't know how well that port holds up. I'm always iffy about console ports, but, it's an old enough game. I'm sure it runs fine. But Space Invaders Extreme, obviously Space Invaders fixed shooter. You're stuck at the bottom of the screen, but I really liked what they did with that, and that I got kind of hooked on that because they added a lot of mechanics, a lot of power-ups, a lot of you could do combos, like killing a certain amount of blah blah blahs in a certain amount of time and keep that going, and then get certain power-ups, and then you had little boss fights and stuff, which was pretty cool. I wouldn't say it's the most hard game at all, so it's actually pretty beginner friendly for the most part, but also just overall it's just sheer fun. So good stuff. Go check that out. But other than that, I started getting into a little bit of collecting with like Genesis and then Game Gear and Game Boy primarily, and Game Boy Advance. And honestly, there aren't that many shmups out there for that stuff. So I was just like, okay, whatever, And then I don't know. It's always been an on and off thing for me, because over the years, shmups have always been like that thing where it's like I get really hooked for like maybe a month, maybe like 3 months, and then it dies down, and then I'm back on like some other kind of SRPG or JRPG or strategy game. One of those three, usually SRPG or strategy, but it's, or maybe a Harvest Moon game or a Story of, now it's Story of Seasons, but a Harvest Moon game if that sort of thing came out. Well, or Rune Factory, really. Moving on. But that kind of built up over the years, and it became more and more, and then it became more of a thing about relaxation. Because, with different things happening in my life personally, I won't go into detail about that. That's not what this podcast is about. But, for the most part, once I actually started to figure out how shmups should be played versus me just being like, wee, let's play a game, it was one of those things where I actually found a lot of relaxation in it. And in being the kind of game that you can either pick up for 15 minutes or the kind of game you can really deep dive, like have a nice deep dive into and figure it out and play it well. It's got that flexibility of being both. So and I really enjoy that. So it became one of those things where it's just, okay, well, I've got a little bit of time. I really need to unwind. There's some things going on in my life, my dark period, that time. It became that little, okay, I need to cool my jets, get my head clear. Let's stop for 15 minutes and play ourselves a nice little shmup. And then, I'd walk away from that after 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes, and think clearer. And for the most part, it became a very relaxing thing. And it doesn't matter what kind of shmup it was, whether or not it was a bullet hell or like a horizontal game or even a game that might actually kind of frustrate me a little bit on its difficulty curve. It didn't really matter because in the end, I still felt pretty good, even if I didn't do well. It was one of those things where it's just like this. It really helped me in some dark times, and puzzle games the same way. It was one of those things where I find a lot of relaxation and peace with them. But when did my small love and casual play go from that to a bit more hardcore? Well, I'd say that was actually in the past 4 years when I discovered things like, oh my gosh, there's actually a scene going on. There's cave games. There's Psycho games. There's this and that. And I recognized some of the stuff growing up, and I recognized because surprisingly, of course the arcade scene died where I was at, but, there were still arcade games here and there, just randomly. Lucky me. But, actually, believe it or not, there was actually an arcade in my mall up until maybe about 4 or 5 years ago. Then the mall remodeled, and they got kicked out. And I was not happy. I'm still not happy about that. I don't care if there's a new Hobby Lobby. I miss my Chuck E. Cheese. I miss my Tilt Arcade. Give me that. I got kids. I want to take them to Chuck E. Cheese, but it's gone. Whatever. But about 4 years ago, I started going down the rabbit hole, and my little Shmupcades started getting longer and longer. It went from oh, I'm really into this for about a month, to, oh, I'm really into this for about half the year, to, oh, I'm really into this from every other day, to what I've turned into now. Pokemon has transformed into its final form. And about 2 years ago, I discovered the Project Tohu stuff, and I'm surprised I hadn't come across it earlier because I was looking into it, different kind of shmups on and off over the years for so long. I'm surprised it took me that long to find them. But I really started attaching to myself to that because I find Tohu games to be very relaxing as well. They're a little bit slower than a lot of bullet hells, but they still have that level of difficulty that I can really appreciate and I can really dive myself into and really concentrate on and clear my head. So it was always one of those things where, I like that. And for the most part, in the past 4 to 6 years, I've never really rooted myself to one specific, subgenre of the shmups. Whether it be, something more traditional or retro stuff on the consoles of Genesis with Musha or Truxton. I always talk about those. Of course, Gradius. I love the Gradius series. And, a lot of the arcade stuff. Obviously, I throw some shade on people that are always oh man, Cave's the greatest. But there's a reason why they think that, and I won't deny that. But, I play everything, so I like it all. I don't really hold any one franchise over the other. It really depends on my mood and what I'm actually looking for, because whether it be, something like Thunder Force or Defender or Twinbee or, Parodius or DonPachi, whatever it is, I find them all, just beautiful works of art and game, all in their own right, for different, for varying different reasons. Whether it be, musically, stylistically, mechanically, thematically, I like it all. And that's where I am at today. I'm still discovering new things, even though it's, some of them have been around for a long time. and I'm always looking out for, new stuff. And luckily, we are in this strange time and renaissance in terms of indie games. And it's been going on since like about 2009. But a lot of these more niche genres have been like coming back with a vengeance. And as a person that's been kind of a niche gamer almost his entire life with things like grand strategy and roguelikes, from things like, even things like NetHack and something newer, Brogue. If you like your old school ASCII roguelikes, I highly recommend Brogue. It's free, by the way. That's Brogue. Like, yo bro, but mix it with Rogue. Or even shmups in general. That kind of stuff has been having a serious resurgence, and that makes me, like, just ridiculously happy. Twin sticks in general, too, man. Twin sticks are a funny animal because I can't really think of anything before, maybe Geometry Wars or Crimson Land that was like really notable, because I think it was a hardware problem in terms of like, how do we translate this from the arcades, which are now dying, the arcade scene, to console? We can't. But with, the onset of, twin sticks, twin analog sticks with like the PS and all that, well, PS2, well, PS1, from like the PlayStation stuff and Xbox stuff, and then to the GameCube. Before all that, we didn't really have good top-down shooters and really good twin-stick shooters, more specifically. So all you could really find and really mention would have been maybe like Smash TV or Robotron. Maybe Berserk. I heard one person throw an argument for Berserk, but I really don't think Berserk is a twin-stick shooter. I just look at that as more of like a top-down shooter. It's too slow. I really like Berserk, but it's no Robotron or Smash TV. You're not necessarily kiting enemies and getting them into formations and like behind like whatever walls you may have or whatever's going on. They play very differently. Moving on. That's where I'm at. I'm always on the lookout for new stuff, but I'm always on the lookout for something I might have missed. So if you personally have any recommendations, please let me know or share it out on my Discord, which I should be starting up very soon. Or tweet at me at sensei_pong. No, I'm not. This isn't the shilling section. I'm just letting y'all know this is here. But let people know what's really good out there. I always like doing that kind of stuff. That's why I'm always out on the lookout for new cool stuff. But let's move on to specific genres here. Let's move on. Let's cover the real basic stuff. What's my favorite Danmaku bullet hells? And I've said this in the past. I'm gonna say it again. And I know I just said I don't think I have a favorite game out there, but my favorite game of all time is Muchi Muchi Pork. I understand it's not the best cave game out there mechanically or, thematically or whatever you might say, or gameplay-wise even. But look, I'm a real, like, this is gonna stay a family-friendly podcast, but if you know Muchi Muchi Pork, but I'm very weak-kneed when it comes to cute-em-ups in general. And I find the game absolutely just a ball to play. Just everything from the music to the characters to I'm being an anime fan. It's just hilarious to me. And we don't want to look. But you, the listener, and me, the podcaster. I know you don't want to hear about my personal, preferences and all that, and just being weird and creepy, so we'll move on. So what's some other good Danmaku bullet hells? I was like tiptoeing around that so hard. Yeah, I'm done. Moving on. Some other good Danmaku bullet hells. One I recently well, when I say recent, it wasn't very recent. It was like a couple years ago. But a more newer game that is newer. I think it came out in 2015. It's out on Steam. I don't believe it's out on anything else. It's called Blue Revolver. And it feels and plays like a cave game, but it's not a cave game, but it is amazing. Another kind of classic series that I really enjoy, despite Blue Revolver not being a classic series. So a classic series I really enjoy is the Strikers 1945 series by Saikyo. Whether it be Strikers 1, 2, or 3, I don't really care. I like them all for their own reasons. If I were to actually have to choose, I might have to choose maybe 2 over the other 3, just in terms of, what kind of ships you get, what kind of, power-ups, and just, actually more or less level design than anything else. Moving on. Of course, I like it, basically all the cave stuff. I do like all the stuff by Zune, which is the Touhou Project stuff, the Touhou Project guy. But, look, okay, I know the Touhou Project stuff isn't the easiest stuff to get over here in the West. So, actually, something that you might be interested in is this free game out on Steam called Jigoku Kisetsukan, Sense of the Seasons. It was released in 2015 by a developer named Emad, which is EMAD. It's free, and it's basically a Touhou game. So, look, it's free. Get it, man. I'm surprised, and I know a lot of other people are surprised that the game wasn't at least $5, at least $10, easily 15 or 20. The fact that Jigoku Kisetsukan is free, it blows my mind. The guy did us all a big giant favor and was like, look, Touhou games aren't on Steam at the moment. Just get them, I know there's 2 of them now, but on Steam. But at the time, I don't think there was any. So, go check that out. It's good stuff. A lot of fun unlockable characters, too. That's pretty cool. Some notable games that aren't Cave, Zune, or Blue Evolver, or Strikers, or anything like that, or Psycho, I want to mention real fast that you may or may not be familiar with is Crimson Clover, X-Zeal on Steam, the DonPachi series. I do like Radiant Silvergun. They're all good stuff. And honestly, when it comes to Danmaku Bullet Hells, I'm not the most pickiest person ever. Pretty much, I'll enjoy it if it's of mediocre quality and better. Like I said before, it's one of those easy to pick up things, but nigh impossible to truly master. And that's kind of my cup of tea. That's actually why I like the Dark Souls series. But, okay, Dark Souls isn't easy to pick up and play. It's definitely not a pick up and play game. But, I like just the methodical nature of the bullet hells in general, That's why I like them. Now let's move on to the other little subgenre here, horizontal shooters. Gradius 5, and really most of the Gradius series is in here. I do like the Thunder Force series. But let's go back to Gradius 5 really fast. Gradius 5 is easily one of the best Gradius games ever made. It originally released out on PS2. You could get it for a PS3 because it does have that backwards compatibility. So that's really cool. If you like Gradius and haven't played that and you own a PS3, dude, go check that out. Something that I have here with parentheses under recency bias is Steriden Binary Stars. Now I picked that up about like a month ago or 2 months ago. I don't remember exactly. It's freaking amazing. It is everything I've wanted in a horizontal shooter. Well, not everything. Like I said last time, I think the levels are just a little bit short, but it's that balancing factor of being a roguelite horizontal shmup. So it's like, with a lot of shmups you kind of get used to like different routines or different like level layouts or different, systems and patterns. With Steriden, since it is roguelite, it's got that, procedurally generated feature of like, oh, you don't know what kind of enemies are coming at you, and you don't know what kind of asteroids or like level hazards are going to be coming at you. But oh my gosh, Steriden almost kind of nails it. And I think that's why it's balanced with the levels being moderately short. Like you can finish a level in like a minute. Sometimes, at least it feels like 30 seconds sometimes. Sometimes it feels like 2 minutes. But I really like that game. And it is pretty dang difficult. And it's got like that looping thing once you beat the final boss. And it just gets harder and harder and basically see how long you can survive sort of stuff. But I really like that. It's really cool. I'm really digging it. Now, if you're a fan of roguelikes, I'm not sure if I'd necessarily recommend it. But if you do like your horizontal shooters, that's definitely a new game you should pick up, and it plays excellent on Switch. That's where I've been playing it. I've been keeping an eye out on it on Steam, but I just never really pulled the trigger. Nah, shmup joke. Moving on, another horizontal one, which is I would say is more of like kind of an arena, but it's kind of in its class of its own, is the original Defender by Atari or by Williams, and then published by one or the other. I don't remember. I want to say it's Williams originally, just straight up. But Defender, if you don't know, it's an interesting classic vector game. But basically, you're controlling this ship, and you've got a little radar in the corner, and shows you this area where you can go back and forth, almost like Fantasy Zone if you're familiar with that game. But you're going back and forth and protecting these little guys on the bottom, and every once in a while, different kind of aliens would come down and pick them up, and if they leave the screen, they're gone for good. Now there's other enemies you have to get rid of, and the way the levels are set up is wave-based, and you've got like your laser, you've got your bomb, which clears the screen, and you've got a warp, which may or may not be helpful. Kind of similar to asteroids. But I don't know, I got really addicted to that game back in the 90s. And I remembered it from the arcade, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is the greatest Genesis game ever made for a little bit. But from time to time, I still pick up, a version of Defender and play it, because I just love Defender in general. It doesn't really matter what version it is. All the Defenders are really good. Which reminds me, thinking about recency bias with Sterriton, Aqua Kitty UDX, man. If you like Defender, you should go check that one out, because that's basically the Defender we've been waiting for years. With Defender, obviously, I do enjoy Fantasy Zone, despite being really, really bad at it. And, of course, if I like Gradius and I like my cute-em-ups, I like Parodius. The entire Parodius series is pretty good in general. I might recommend the Super Nintendo one as, one of the key top-tier Parodiuses, but for the most part, Parodius is just weird and wacky and makes no sense sometimes. You don't know what you're shooting, but it's still fun because as playable characters, you can get the Vic Viper from Gradius or the Twin Bee, and those are the two ones I can think of off the top of my head without really thinking about it. I didn't really write this down, but anyways. But moving on down the list real fast, twin stick shooters. Now, like I did say, I don't think twin stick shooters didn't really have a resurgence until the turn of the century with Geometry Wars. So it's really hard to nail down those classic twin stick shooters. I would say I really, really like them. But with that, obviously, things like Smash TV and Robotron 2084 is right high up on my list. And the Geometry Wars series in general. That does include Geometry Wars 1, 2, and 3 if you're ever curious about me talking about it before. I like them all. They're all really good. Crimson Land, only because it's kind of nostalgic for me, because it was at that point of the early internet and me looking around on the internet looking for free games and random games you find on the internet. Crimson Land was one of them, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is like Robotron, I was like, I gotta find that game that's like Robotron, give it to me now. No one was making that sort of stuff, and Crimson Land was filling that hole, and I was like, shabam. If you're not familiar with Crimson Land, though, and you think it might be a new game, it's definitely not. It's a classic. It is available for purchase out on Steam. They re-released an HD remake of it, 10 Tons, the indie developer, for Steam, Nintendo Switch, I want to say PS4, Xbox One. I think it's on everything at this point, except for 3DS and Vita. But who cares? It's fine. It's fine. It's fine if they don't, because it's kind of a bloody game. So I'm not sure if I want to see a little kid be like, I'm picking up Crimson Land. Look at all that blood and gore. I'm not sure if I want to see that. But if you are looking for something like Crimson Land, I do recommend Tesla vs. Lovecraft, and I'm going to put that with a hard recency bias on that, because I bought that maybe less than a month ago. So I'm really digging that game, and it's basically Crimson Land, with, I would think, is just a far more fun theme. You're playing as Tesla, and you're fighting off Lovecraftian horrors with, lightning weapons. Who doesn't like that? That's pretty cool stuff. On here on my notes, though, I do have Ubermosh. The Ubermosh series in general is really good. I'm not really good at it, but it does have some really cool mechanics, like deflecting bullets with a sword and cutting the bullets in half, so you end up getting 2 shots going off in a direction. if you get the ricochet right and the bouncing mechanic right. It's a cool series, and all the Ubermosh games are like $1, so or like $4. I think I got Ubermosh, the original one, for like 50 cents. So they hit the Steam sales hard a lot throughout the years, like several times a year. So if you like twin stick shooters, keep an eye out for Ubermosh on Steam, or 10 Tons in general, because they make a lot of good like top-down shooters. So go check that out. Here on my list, something nostalgic when I was like putting it together really fast. Thinking about Crimson Land reminded me of Loaded on PS1. And I never actually owned Loaded, but I do remember playing it a lot when I was a kid and, with my friends on their PS1s. But all I can remember and say about that game is Teddy Bear Attack. That game was pretty fun, kind of bloody, but really fun. But Teddy Bear Attack, man, that clown gave me nightmares. Some honorable mentions for this list, of course, does include Binding of Isaac, Enter the Gungeon, and Nuclear Throne, which I just picked up Enter the Gungeon on Switch, so I can't give you my full detailed opinion on that version, but it's a fun game. And of course, it's a roguelite hybrid. Who would have thought? Good job, Pong. Right on brand there. Moving on. Some old school traditional stuff. Now, I did mention Centipede, so I'm going to mention it again. I really like Centipede, but if you want to play the better game of the two, it's Millipede, because Millipede does have like different like a few extra like types of insects that you have to fight, like different enemies, and they also have the DDT tanks that explode when you shoot them, which can be very nice to like save for strategic moments, because if you don't know what DDT is, it's a type of pesticide. So look, the storyline behind Centipede doesn't have to make any sense, because nobody knows the actual storyline. And yes, there is a storyline, but you're a garden gnome protecting your garden from all the buggies. So yeah, that's why there's DDT, and that's why you're shooting insects. The more you know. Anyways, Millipede is the better of the two, and I forget what podcast it was. It was some retro podcast talking about, I don't know anybody that actually says they love Centipede. Yo, I love Centipede. I may be the only person in the world, but I love it. It's one of my favorite arcade games of all time.
Yeah, I love it.
Thank you. Anyways, moving on. Some other old school stuff I did want to mention. Obviously, I like the Raiden series. I haven't mentioned that yet, but the Raiden series, I see it as like that precursor to like what, shmups became later in the late 90s, and like that time in between like the traditional shmups of like the 80s to the 90s. So Raiden in general, I always like looking at like all the Raiden games and seeing how it progresses over time with different kind of power-ups and scoring mechanics and whatever you got. Raiden's a great game series, just in general. The final old school one I did want to give a shout out to that I really enjoy but is really weird, and I really don't think it holds up very well, is Time Pilot. And it's mostly because, I don't know, it's just a pretty straightforward game. It's like the 194X series, which I really do love and enjoy, but I don't think the older ones hold up as well, because it is just so straightforward. But yeah, like Time Pilot, really you're just fighting off a few waves of enemies and like fighting off like the mothership, sort of, kind of. But it does have like this fun mechanic where like you start off in World War II, then you move on to you start off in World War I, then move on to World War II, start fighting fighters from there, move on to like blah 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 to the future. Remember there was a kind of a futuristic level in there? I haven't played it in a while, but it's pretty good stuff. I remember it being really difficult. I could be wrong, but I think what it was its control scheme, because it was kind of a multi-directional shooter that you're constantly moving forward. So not like Asteroids where you can stop your momentum and then like stay in a fixed point, or like a lot of twin stick shooters where you can stay in a fixed point but like you're constantly moving, so you got to constantly turn left and right to like try to avoid stuff. So it's a little bit weird in that sense, but it's an interesting look back in time. Time Pilot. That was a joke. It fell apart. It'll be funnier over time. Let's move on to let's go back in time. Let's go back in time now to the other stuff I have here on the list. Classic fixed shooters. Oh boy, no, I'm not scraping at the end of the barrel. I'm just covering stuff that people would still consider shmups. At least the bulk of the shmup audience. My favorite fixed shooter of all time is Phoenix. And yes, I do like Galaxian and I do love Galaga, but I think Phoenix is really where it's at. And it's not as smooth as Galaga, and I don't think it's as party as Galaga. But Phoenix does have some really neat and fun mechanics that a lot of people overlook, and I find it a very underrated, fixed shooter in general. It's by Taito, and I believe it came out in 1981, so that's a little bit before my time, but I do remember at least one Phoenix arcade game in one of my favorite arcades growing up. Basically what it is that, yes, it's a space shooter, and you're fighting these space birds. And one interesting point that should be mentioned is I'm not sure if it was the first shmup to have it, but it had a boss fight at like the end of like a certain run of levels, and that's pretty cool. And you like knock off parts of its shield, kind of like a Yar's Revenge thing, where you're chipping off a like an actual physical shield, and you got to shoot that core and shoot the cores if I remember right. But the other neat mechanic that was actually part of that game was like some of the enemies would be flying in like giant birds, and you can't just shoot at them and kill them. You have to actually shoot their head, shoot the core, because let's say you shoot off, its left wing. What happens? Its left wing explodes, but it's still flying up there, and you haven't killed it, and it's still trying to kill you and shooting at you. I always thought Phoenix was a really fun, old school fixed shooter because of that, and it had some really neat vibes on that. Other fixed shooters that I want to mention, of course, Space Invaders Extreme. Do I prefer Galaxian over Galaga? I actually kind of do, because I'm a Space Invaders nut. Sometimes I'm just in that mood for like that really slow, methodical gameplay where it's just like you've got to aim every shot matters, But I don't find it as, brutal as trying to get actually far in Space Invaders, because Space Invaders, it's always that impending doom and you will lose. But thinking about this, only because my dad really loved it back in the day on the 2600, and I played it, and I was like, yeah, actually, this is pretty good. This is basically Phoenix is Demon Attack on the 2600. Now, I don't think Demon Attack is as good as Phoenix, but Demon Attack is still a phenomenal game with very similar mechanics in terms of the birds. So go check that out. It's pretty fun. I don't think they're birds, though. Can't really tell. It's that those 2600 graphics. They're always blocky as all rainbow barf hell. Let's move on. Arena shooters like Asteroids. This is kind of a small genre, so I'll make it quick. 3 games that are notable that I really like. In terms of the classics, we've got Sinistar and Bosconian. Bosconian, definitely. Sinistar sometimes is just too much for me, but Bosconian is like that perfect jello that just melts in your mouth. If you don't know what it is, it's a Namco classic, but you got these little ships flying everywhere, you've got asteroids flying everywhere, and you've got these space stations that you have to destroy. And if you can land your shot just right, you can bypass, the outside, modules and go straight for the core. Shoot the core! That sort of stuff. It's fun. It's fun. It's a good multi-directional. And definitely an old classic, and I'm really surprised they haven't, really expanded on that series. Kind of sad. But moving on, the more recent things is Bit Blaster. Now, Bit Blaster, I want to say, is like only $1 or $2 out on Steam, but it's really good. And there's some other stuff like Bit Blaster, which is probably better than Bit Blaster, but Bit Blaster is the one I'm more familiar with, so I'm going to stick with that. So, yeah, if you like your things like Asteroids, which I do like Asteroids, but you want something new, go check out Bit Blaster. It's kind of fun. Moving on to other kind of shooters and shmups that people would be like, now, Sensei, that ain't a shmup. Let's go to run and guns, shall we? Now, I'm being kind of a platformer nut as well, and being a shmup nut myself as well on the other side of the coin. Why wouldn't I like run and guns? It's that fusion of two, So with this, obviously, the Contra series is there. If I would like to try to pick apart some notable ones, Contra 4 for the DS and Contra Hard Corps on the Genesis. I am a huge fan of the originals, out on the NES and all that, and the arcade, but Contra 4, I feel, is a very underrated game. Now, I haven't played it in about 7 years, but Contra 4 is really good from what I remember, and I really dug that, and that, basically reignited my entire love for the run and gun genre. Moving on, the Metal Slug series. That's a classic Neo Geo, run and gun stuff. A lot of comedy. It's got that real nice Neo Geo sprite art going. In general, if you're not familiar with the Metal Slug series, they just re-released 1, 2, and 3 and X out on the Switch. So if you have a Switch, go check that out. But if I were to if I were to like try to pick out one Metal Slug that I like the most out of all of them, it's really hard for me because I love them all. I like them all for mildly different reasons. Some nostalgic, some in-game stuff like what kind of weapons and I'm brain farting. What's that word? Vehicles. Such a simple word, but the different kind of vehicles. I might have to say Metal Slug X or Metal Slug 2. Basically the same game. One's basically X is a remake of 2, but Metal Slug 2 is where it's at. Metal Slug 3 is great and all, but Metal Slug. Moving on, and I'm putting this again with some recency bias in parentheses here, but Cuphead last year, Game of the Year last year. I know I just said Puyo Puyo Tetris was Game of the Year 2017, but Cuphead is also Game of the Year 2017. There's a lot of Game of the Years 2017. But Cuphead is basically a boss rush game. It does have some run and gun moments where it's an actual level, but if you like well-designed bosses with some amazing artwork and some great, classic like 1930s jazz, go check out Cuphead, man. Cuphead is where it's at. It's like that Max Fleischer animation style, and it's actually hand animated, so it's really neat. Go check it out. It's out on Steam and Xbox One. And I wanted to pick something kind of more obscure, but not really. That's something that you may know or something that you don't. But Alien Hominid. Alien Hominid, more specifically on Xbox Live Arcade for the 360, because I really dug that game. And I remember playing the original out on Newgrounds when that was new and free, which you could still play the free version. It's not as good as, the remake, but it's still really good. I'm really hoping at some point Tom Fulp comes around to making another version of Alien Hominid, because that would be kind of neat. I want to see that. Get on that, Tom. Please. Moving on to another really obscure, well, okay, it's not obscure. Okay, run and guns are not obscure, but a really kind of small niche within the niche of a niche are tube shooters, because I really like tube shooters. They're just, if you don't know what it is, basically it's like a fixed shooter, but you're stuck on a track going around the screen. And I've said this in the past, and I'm going to say it, Tempest is one of my favorite games of all time. Only because it's got that weird like mechanic of strategy where it's like the enemies are coming towards you like you're in 3D, and they come onto your track, and now you gotta avoid them, try to get rid of them, or just like completely try to avoid it, and try to survive the wave. It's pretty good stuff. Gyrus is another interesting one, and specifically I want to say Gyrus on the NES, because I think that's the one I'm most familiar with. But Gyrus and Tempest, awesome tube shooters. Go check it out. Tempest 4000 recently released. Haven't played that yet, but I'm keeping my eye out on it. But yeah, and it's the original guy making it, so it's got to be good. And it looks great. Tempest in general. If you like your weird, quirky arcade games, go check out Tempest 4000. That's a new one. Gallery shooters. No one talks about these. I can't think of a whole bunch of them, but one that came to mind was Nom's 1975. Outside of that, I don't know. Thinking about Nom 1975, though, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, only because it's really, really kind of an unfair game. It's a real quarter eater. I just remember playing it in the arcade, and I recently played it again. And they actually made a re-release out on the Switch, so go check that out if you really like your balls-hard gallery shooters. I'm not sure if any of y'all are looking for that, but yeah. Nom 1975, whatever the name was. But yeah, Nom. It's really fun co-op. Thinking about gallery shooters though, Bot Vice and Strikey Sisters is relatively new. It came out a few years ago. They're both really good. I'm still really bad at them because they're gallery shooters, and I'm really just bad at gallery shooters. Thinking about that, Centipede and Millipede, sort of. They're not really gallery shooters. Moving on to the final really I'm really stretching the definition of shmup here. And mind you, I don't really think of them as shmups, but I can see why people would. Are rail shooters and light gun games, the aka borderline shmup. With this, I'm not going to go into too much detail because frankly, it was mostly just like arcade versions of this that I played. And it's the House of the Dead series, Point Blank, Time Crisis, and actually this new one. Yes, there's a new one out there. And I wouldn't say it's as good as like the past three, like House of the Dead, Point Blank, or Time Crisis. It's not as good, but it's this arcade machine called Space Invaders Frenzy. And what it is, it's basically like this giant like seizure machine of flashing lights and LEDs that it's basically Space Invaders with some extra, different types of Space Invader-like enemies coming down, and you got to protect your base, but instead you're manning these like giant like turret guns, and they shake every time you press the buttons, and they're really fun. And my youngest is every time he pass by, he's like, I gotta da invaders. I'm like, where'd you learn that? Where'd you learn that word? Yeah, so he just turned 3, so his vocabulary is expanding, but where you learned that word, I don't know. But either way, it's kind of interesting. Maybe it was me, because I was like, oh cool, Space Invaders. So he was like, invaders, So I don't know. Anyways, Space Invaders Frenzy. If you can find a version of it anywhere laying around, if you're in a bigger city, obviously that's going to be easier to find. I think it was more just luck on my part because the town I'm in isn't like really big, but it's a college town, so it's big enough, and there's stuff around to do. So it's weird. It's a weird like balance, but I think I was just lucky. But if you do find Space Invaders Frenzy, maybe throw a quarter at it, you might enjoy it. And, that's a quarter. That's, pocket change, yo. So just give it a try. Or maybe it's 50 cents. I don't know. Maybe it's $1 per play. If it was $1 per play, I don't know. That one time, it's okay, $1 is not bad. At least give it a shot. Maybe you'll enjoy it. And hopefully, they might come out with a VR version. Actually, that'd be really cool. They need to come out with a VR version of that. Yeah. Oh man, for some reason it's not here on my notes, but I forgot to mention Gunstar Heroes. That's an easily one of the best run and guns on the Sega Genesis of all time. If not the best, at least my favorite run and gun on the Genesis. You should go check that out. I'm terrible at the game, but it's really fun and great co-op. Anywho, we're going to take a quick break because we're crunching hard on time, and I didn't want this podcast to be this long. We might hit that 2-hour mark. That's not what I wanted. Shut it down, shut it down. And welcome back to the I almost said Sunday podcast. Anywho, welcome back. So I want to tag this in at the end, but since we are crunching on time real fast, I'll try to make it as quick as possible. And it's just a little, kind of a first impressions review of a game I've been playing recently, which, you might enjoy, but, if you would enjoy it, I don't want you to miss out on it because, hear me out. And then I kind of changed my mind because I looked at reviews and some reviews were actually pretty legit. I was like, okay, it's not a meme game. It's called Spacecats with Lasers, and it's out on Steam and Nintendo Switch. And for that, I'm assuming it's probably out on PS4 and Xbox One. I don't care to look, but you go look for it yourself. Spacecats with Lasers. It made me curious, and I put it on my wish list. And I noticed that it was on my wish list, and I was like, it's on here for a reason. Why is that? I looked at the trailer, and it looked like kind of a slower version of Robotron. I'm sorry. I like what I like. Get off my back. Anyways, I ended up getting it. Regular price is $4.99, so if it goes on sale, it's cheaper than that. And, I wasn't expecting too much, but I think because my standards were so low, I actually ended up really liking it. because it is basically like it's not as crazy as Robotron in terms of enemies or like a Crimson Land or Tesla versus Lovecraft situation, but it's more of like that Berserk situation where you've got, a few enemies all shooting at you, and you gotta like really time off your stuff. There are some bullet hell points where it's like some enemies, definitely put out like a giant spray of bullets which you've got to weave your way through, but you do have a dash mechanic as kind of your saving grace. For the most part, I really like it. It is pretty shallow because there is only, one type of game mode, and that's the arcade mode, and you can change the difficulty from normal, well, easy, normal, and hard. But, for what I was expecting, for what I got, it's actually really good. Now, why did I think it was a meme game? Well, I don't believe there's a storyline at all. It doesn't exactly matter. What are you? You're the space cat riding like what seems to be a wedge of cheese, shooting lasers out of its eyes at rats and dogs. Why? I don't know. It doesn't have to make sense. It's just fun. The power-ups are pretty good, like level to level. You do power up a little bit, you can change your fire rate, you can change, certain things that might happen randomly, like what kind of, like, oh, you can raise a percentage of how many power-ups show up after killing an enemy, or like you can change like this extra thing where it's like, oh, chain reaction, where it's like you shoot one enemy and it creates a lightning bolt to a nearby enemy, and that's kind of neat too. The boss is pretty rough. It's like this giant pug on a spaceship. That was kind of hard. I haven't beat him yet. I think this game might actually be a bit more hardcore than what it actually looks like from its, from a glance. I think that's actually where the game kind of falls a little bit, is I have a feeling that this game isn't selling super well because of two reasons, and if you're a developer, take this into consideration. One, it looks like a meme game, so already you're pulling in a different kind of audience that aren't necessarily really into shmups or twin-stick shooters that are actually kind of difficult. Number two, you're not pulling in your core audience, a twin-stick shooter audience, or that hardcore shmup audience because, well, it looks like a meme game. You can't take that seriously. But overall, oddly enough, Spacecats with lasers gets my stamp of approval. And if you want a number system on this, I'm going to give it maybe a 6.5 or maybe borderline 7 out of 10 because it's actually pretty good for what it is, for the price. It's a great, budget title. I really like it. Anyways, outside of that, good stuff. Go check that out. Anyways, I'm quickly running out of time, and I got a lot of people walking in and out of the room, so I should really stop recording. So with that, thank you for listening. Leave a review out on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you're listening this to on. And if you're out on YouTube, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below at your own discretion. You can find me at youtube.com/SenseiPong or out on Twitter at Sensei_Pong. Yo, follow me there at some point very soon, and if I do get that, I will probably have that in the link in the description below, but I will be starting a Discord just titled something like the Bullet Hello Shmupcast or whatever. I don't know. Whatever. Go check it out. Hope you enjoyed the show. And that's about it. Oh, balls, I totally forgot to mention. Yeah, if you do want to go check out that other Shmupcast, which I highly recommend if you're actually kind of a hardcore shmup player. It's called The Electric Underground, and links and RSS feed is down below. Yeah, go check that out. It's good stuff. I really like it. And it gets my Sensei Pong stamp of approval. Good stuff. Until next time, go for the core! Sensei Pong signing out. Bye, subscribe. Copycat, that's bull. I'm not. Should really drink water before I even try.